So we have many reasons, clearly from the keynote speakers' points as well as the issues raised by the preceding speakers. It's clear that we have many reasons for climate change education, and as we all know, I think some aspects of the ongoing ecological change, which is global and local at the same time, have to be addressed. That's a good enough reason, but nevertheless, I want to make some additional points there. Because I'm making these additional points because climate change education, in my view, needs to be more than just an additional topic added to science textbooks. I think it needs to have a catalyzing effect that will produce new kinds of subjects, and that is the whole point of education anyway, to produce new kinds of subjects who, like Sajida was saying, have to take on themselves the burden of bringing about social change. So if we are just going to add another climate change as yet another subject, it will either provoke denial, which is now worldwide, or climate anxiety, either. So if we are serious about using climate change education as a new framework to catalyze new kinds of subjects, then I think there is a need to locate it within the larger history to understand its relevance. Next slide, please. So there, I think it's important to locate education in this climate change education in the history of Kerala. Now, usually we are familiar with locating the school education in the history of democratization in modern Kerala, and that is the dominant discourse. That is the discourse that we proudly, cite everywhere. But then, if you look at the economic reviews of the Kerala state since the early 1960s, very clearly there is a human capital approach already there. So the state has had that kind of ambitions from very early times, but that's not something we will talk about a lot now. Maybe during the questions we can discuss that. The less explored approach to understanding school education in Kerala is through the history of the state in Kerala. So my point here is to say that if we want to really see what kind of change climate education can really bring, then we probably have to place it within the history of the state and various child protection regimes in the Malayalam speaking regions. And I use the term Malayalam speaking regions deliberately because the history of the state's intervention in childhood actually starts from the 19th century with modern governmentality. And let me just also give you, because I use the term regimes of childhood, let me just tell you what I mean by that. It is basically referring to a specific historically shaped networks of rules, norms, ideas, institutions, practices which govern, and institutions which govern childhood. And I am saying that there are at least four, at least as a historian, my view is that there are at least four different regimes of childhood, and maybe a fifth one that is emergent. And here, when we study regimes of childhood, there are three agencies that are important, I think. One is the state. The second, of course, is the family, which is ensconced in a caste community in Kerala. And thirdly, the school. So these are the three agencies. And in Kerala, the prime agency has always been the school. And despite this is the peculiar thing, though we keep talking about education as school education in Kerala as essentially an achievement of democratization and something that has obviously contributed to democratization, historically this process of democratization hardly really affected childhood. The three agencies have always been the state, the school, and the family that is embedded in a conservative civil societies, if I may say so, a Gramscian kind of civil society. And I think the need to understand, so therefore there is a need to understand critically the prevalent regime of childhood in Kerala. We need to think of what exactly is the regime of childhood we have in Kerala now to establish the full relevance. So I'm trying to make an argument for climate change education that is not limited to merely educating people about the terrible dangers that await us in the future. So I've written about this elsewhere. I mean, I'm beginning to work on this. I have a working paper on this, and where I talk about 4 different regimes of childhood. I will not speak at length about the first 2. If you want to know more, we can discuss later in the discussion. So the first is called responsible parenting, which is the 19th century framework of which was began to be prevalent in the southern parts of Kerala, where modernization of childhood had actually begun early on. Then the second is called romantic childhood, which again is it's a brief moment actually in the between the 1930s and 1950s, in the wake of independence, and a whole lot of aspirations about a socially equal society. The third is called aspirational childhood, and that is one of the regimes that is prevalent now. Also, the fourth one, child governance, which is also a regime that's prevalent now. And in each of these, the state has a specific role. The connections between the relations that link the state, the family, and the school keep changing in each of these regimes. And the last 2 have been current in Kerala at least since the 1990s. So in each of these, the child is a transaction point of these 3 different institutions. So if you in aspirational childhood, which is very prevalent now, the child is actually a resource that parents are supposedly owning, and they are expected to mold the child into forms that bring prestige and upward mobility to families. And there is enough research that supports this. Your work by people like David Sancho and others, which establish this pretty well. Then the role of the state and schooling is more or less kind of, just as facilitators, nothing really more than that. So in a sense, there is an unseen participant here in this give and take in this matrix is probably the market. The child has to be prepared for the market. So this is rampant now in all social groups in Kerala, with any social group with upward mobility aspirations, but it is most fruitfully, and all the, I think a lot of data that Sajita showed, confirms this kind of this point. So if the responsible parenting, which I told you about, of the 19th or late 19th, early century, was one in which the child was a meeting point between the parents, family, and the state. And the child actually belonged to both as a family member and as a citizen, with a lot of tension, but nevertheless, and demanding particular kinds of attention from both. In the aspirational regime, the child is a transaction point between the family and the market, and the shaping of the child's inner worlds and mental skills, physical skills, dispositions, everything is a family enterprise aimed at this upward mobility through the market, with the state assuming the role of a facilitator. So that's aspirational childhood for you. Then the other regime is called child governance. And here child governance, the child is the transacting point between family, market, state, school, and civil society, because the child is to be fashioned not only as a useful subject who can enter the market, but also a civil subject, somebody who is civil. So the paternal, here you can see that these are children. The child targeted is usually the child who belongs to the disadvantaged family, and the paternal authority of neoliberalized and securitizing state under the post 1990s global child rights regime. Actually, in fact, the global child rights regime in Kerala largely addresses this group of children, and it aims, the language is very, very good. I mean, if you look at it, it's participation, it's empowerment, and all that. But there is research that actually reveals these interventions to be ambivalent and conditional. And I mean, I'm just mentioning one name here, Marianne Chaco's work. And importantly, the poor children bear inordinate burdens of citizenship, like again Anu was pointing out. So children who go to these kinds of schools are expected to bear the burdens of saving the world, saving society, saving polity, everything. right now in Kerala, we are seeing a moment where there is a fear of failed children. Actually, it's especially coming up in the wake of the anti-drug abuse campaigns, which has been promoted as a very, very dangerous moment for children in Kerala. Here you can see the two kinds of regimes: the aspirational childhood regime and the child governance regime, actually coming together. Focusing on the child, bringing together, and the child is really the childhood is now the focus of one single fear, that the child involved is not going to be, children are not becoming useful subjects, nor are they becoming civil subjects. And this fear is now extended even to the rich. So in all the discourse around the anti-drug campaign, the constant refrain is, even children of the better class families, highly educated rich families, they are using drugs. So I'm asking you this question: are we shutting our eyes to anxieties generated by aspirational regimes of childhood? you know Anxiety is a necessary outcome of that, the kind of power that is exerted on children in the aspirational, by the aspirational. So interestingly, MDMA, if you look at I mean, I've only read whatever literature that's available about the effects of medical effects of MDMA. It says that the effect is to create a feeling of empathy. Basically, if you take empathy, suddenly your social skills improve. You talk, you share emotions, you become very empathetic, you're able to listen to others. It's of course very temporary and also quite harmful in the long run. But if children are consuming drugs and they're choosing MDMA, I don't know what drugs they choose, but MDMA is supposed to be very popular now. In that case, there is a serious issue here. So what are we trying to resolve? Are we trying to there is obviously the negative externality of the aspirational regime is upon us, and are we trying to resolve that? So my argument is clearly this: anxieties are rampant among children in present day Kerala. And they are perhaps an effect of the dominant aspirational childhood, and the rising climate change anxieties actually compound them. So if students were worrying about losing days of work because of schooling, schools being used as, in fact, some of the interesting interviews that I've had with young children who are actually refugees of climate change from the coast, is that their schools are being constantly used as camps for during for climate change refuge. We have been trying our best to communicate to policymakers that this should not, you have all these wedding halls lying empty, why not requisition them? And I'm sure even climate change refugees will prefer these wedding halls to schools. So they won't do that, but schools are still being used. So in a sense, so the anxieties of children kind of both getting on in life through education, and climate change impacting them at every level, not just in education but also at every level, losing economic security, the uncertainty, etc. And therefore, healing all anxiety, climate or otherwise, and not just providing more information, has to be the aim of climate change education. So on the basis of this, I'm going to stop here with 5 orientations. I want to propose 5 orientations for climate change education, which, if we are planning to make that a dominant framework, in fact, we should, I think, push for it. One, it should cut across the sciences humanities divide. Now, Pilla sir provided the science part, which is so scary. I was telling Veeramani that maybe I should look at the next train, when it is, and put maybe, because it's no point, you might as well kill yourself. No point. The healing part is the humanities part. So how can we bring together science and humanities is one important, that has to be one important orientation. The second term, that clearly it has to be more than classroom study, because there is enough evidence from environmental psychology which shows that if nature is not part of your subjectivity, then it is alien and outside, and the only way to get nature into your subjectivity is to be in nature for as much as you can. Thirdly, it should provide a new vocabulary for fresh self-understanding. So you have good work now from sociologists like Bruno Latour, who says that we should stop talking about citizenship. We should talk about being terrestrial. We are not citizens or humans. We should talk about ourselves as terrestrials. So the moment you use the word terrestrial, bhuvasi in Malayalam, then you have, kind of swept away this difference between, or living beings. You've kind of, and in fact, even between the beings that we think are non-living, like rocks, we think rocks are dead, and so on. They're not really dead in that rather grim sense. Then fourthly, it should highlight the role of social and economic inequalities at all levels. So from the global level to the local level, so that again, you are kind of loosening. You're not throwing away your sense of national citizenship, but you are kind of loosening it a bit, so that you can understand that processes in our local lives are shaped by worldwide decisions, global decisions. So, to that extent, we need to kind of tweak that a little bit. And finally, it should address the role of secularized casteist culture in hindering ecologically sustainable lives. And here I'm pointing out to the fact that, we take it for granted that the rich will produce waste and the poor will segregate and deal with it. This starts from childhood. This is what is called Aya culture, which is very colonial. So if you go to an early education school, you will find that there are women who are hired as ayas, who help children to clean themselves up after they, when they go to the toilet, and they just walk away, and the women do the cleaning. Now this is where it all starts, if you ask me, because you produce waste, and then you always think that someone else will pick you up. And this is not just a behavioral defect or something like that. It is actually secularized casteism, by which certain kinds of people are expected to pick up waste while certain others, unfortunately, in Kerala you find that even reproduced, even in Harita Karma Sena and others, where in one municipality 99 of 100 waste pickers are Dalit women. Anyway, so we will not get into that, but these are things that should enter the curriculum and actually make children think. So with this, I will stop. Thank you very much.